It's all right, kid.
Oh,
I'll take it from here.
okay. Knock yourself out.
Why are you saying it like that?
Boom, you looking for this?
Holy crap. Thank you. Thank you. You specifically. Thank you. I mean, look at this. Look. Nice. But look at this.
I love you 3,000.
I don't know what to say other than what I've already said. Thank you for the engagement, the comments, the encouragement. Thank you for blowing up that video and for telling me that you wanted to see more. That's what I want. That proper push, that true motivation to make more of these. I am so grateful for it. Now, y'all were telling me that you wanted more of this kind of video. The analysis, the deep thoughts, the editing. But that video was only 7 minutes long. This one is a bit longer. But if the last video was your guys' cup of tea, well, there's a whole new kettle. Granted, it's not the most relevant in terms of what's being popular right now, but I gotta get this out there. I gotta see what you guys think. I want your comments. I want your input, your insight. I want to know if this is the kind of thing you're into. I'm probably gonna not make them 30 minutes long though. Probably just gonna stick to about 10 to 15, if not sometimes shorter than 10, because I believe in being as poignant and as precise as possible. Unless it's funny, in which case I will extend it just a little bit. So no more delays. If I may, allow me to begin this video with a pretentiously easy question. What is a conversation?
Our country is trying to have one of the most difficult conversations. It's a conversation we've been having for 300-400 years.
Advance the cause of the national conversation about
We're having a national conversation about it.
National conversation around sexual. I'm having a real conversation to help drive a national conversation. We look forward to having those conversations.
started a national conversation.
You know, we must have a national conversation on race.
Behind this national conversation.
I'd like to be a part of the conversation because
We don't know how to have productive conversations.
In the early months of 2016, known at the time as the worst year ever, there came a conversation amongst my college dorm floor. Which movie of the MCU is the best overall? This discussion was instigated in preparation for the newest entry in the series, Captain America: Civil War. The trailers were promising a lot. First with Steve and Tony's serious tension, later with the first inclusion of Black Panther on screen, then later with the sudden reveal of Spider-Man! Oh, JJ! Spider-Man! You gotta see this! JJ, look at this!
Hey everyone.
Oh my god, what the f— And boy oh boy did the Russo boys deliver just that. Except, here's where this essay gets weird. I wrote this in April 2019. I had written most of what's here in response to Nando v. Movie's One Marvelous Scene video. What he had done was made a coalition with other YouTubers to analyze their favorite scenes from the rest of the MCU as a fun way to hype up the Endgame premiere. And in my final year of college, my script was a spur-of-the-moment masterpiece of utter procrastination. 2.5 years later...
Oh, dear.
4 years later, I find the script and see that no one on YouTube has analyzed the scene that I've chosen for One Marvelous Scene. Sometimes these YouTube essayists will reference my favorite scene, but this is only to make sure that their scene has more context, that their favorite scene is upheld. But outside of citation, nobody really talks about this particular scene. That's a shame. Out of all of my favorite moments, my all-time favorite MCU scene is not the Bucky escape sequence, nor is it Queens and Spider-Man's perfect introduction to this universe, nor is it even the section, this 13-minute airport fight scene. No, it is in fact the debate over the Sokovia Accords.
They're just talking.
Okay, there's more to it than that, but I believe I should provide some personal context. I have always been a fan of the action-adventure stories. It's that movement that keeps me engaged. It's the reason I prefer A New Hope over Empire, The Last Crusade over Raiders, and it's why I don't mind the Solo movie about Solo. Engaging movement. Ultimately, this is the reason why I adore Civil War over many other MCU films. Action! Break. Action! Break.
Sometimes I want to punch you.
Action! Break. Action! Break. Action! Action! Action!
Let's kick his ass.
But in this scene, these superheroes are sitting down, merely talking. And talking politics, mind you. So why? Why do I find the debate over the Accords more engaging than the rest of this thrilling story? Truth is, this scene made me realize the value of character in storytelling and how simple exchanges can greatly enhance the narrative, even if nothing happens. Because the truth is, a lot happens.
For those who need a refresher or simply have no idea what I'm talking about, here's what you need to know. The Sokovia Accords are named after the incident that occurred in the fictional Sokovia. Long story short, Ultron, the AI developed by and based on Tony Stark, attempted to use the entire country to remake Disney's Dinosaur.
While I am adding some levity to this at-hand topic, in Civil War, 2 movies later, this debate adds the weight, the true impact that Ultron had upon the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The Avengers didn't have a happy ending, ever after all. A lot of people and property were lost, and someone has to answer for it.
And apparently Ultron wasn't enough.
And that's what this scene is for. The Secretary of State, Thunderbolt Ross, is essentially telling our heroes,
"When will you learn that your actions have consequences?"
The Sokovia Accords, as a document in the story, solidifies the weight of the previous conflicts. As in, when Ultron dropped in the pool, there was an actual ripple. Perhaps even a wave that carried on. Both this scene and the debate that follows strengthen the human and artistic legitimacy of the MCU as a whole. Without these scenes, the entire movie doesn't work. Now, with the past being considered, what is the actual debate? After the actions of the Avengers caused the inadvertent deaths of dozens of civilians, should the Avengers cease to be an independent organization and instead sign on to accept government oversight? To help us see which side has the most support, let's tally each Avenger's position. Colonel Rhodes, the government guy, is siding with the governments. Go figure. But more so, he's had far more experience being a prominent face of the Avengers and the US military.
It tested well with focus groups, all right?
I am Iron Patriot.
Listen, War Machine was a little too aggressive, all right? This sends a better message.
Thus, Rhodey would strongly prefer to keep a clean image of his organization because he fully understands the fact that all eyes are on them.
All eyes on me.
Sam Wilson, on the other hand, is far more concerned with those authorities than he is with the people, as he thinks those same government types will eventually lock up the heroes like common criminals. The Vision interjects and offers an equation.
He's saying it's our fault?
I'm saying there may be a causality. Our very strength invites challenge. Challenge incites conflict. And conflict breeds catastrophe. Oversight. Oversight is not an idea that can be dismissed out of hand.
Boom.
Tony Stark, who's been silently brooding, gets called out by Natasha and then Steve, which he uses to push himself away from the team and into the kitchen. Stark then pulls out his phone to show a photo of the boy whose mother confronted him directly at MIT.
Oh, that's Charles Spencer, by the way. He's a great kid. Computer engineering degree, 3.6 GPA. Had a floor-level gig at Intel planned for the fall.
Like the mother, Tony uses the photo to show that despite all the kicking ass they were doing, there's no running away from the collateral damage. There's no getting off scot-free.
If we can't accept limitations, we're boundaryless. We're no better than the bad guys. Tony.
Steve, who has been holding the Accords in his lap, counters Tony's perspective, claiming that letting the weight of the guilt overwhelm you is the same as giving up.
Who said we're giving up?
We are for not taking responsibility for our actions. This document just shifts the blame.
Rhodey immediately rejects this, reinforcing his stance that these 117 governments should be trusted because of their legitimate authority, as opposed to
The World Security Council, it's not SHIELD, it's not Hydra.
No, but it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change.
That's good.
Tony, now returning to the group, runs with the idea of changing agendas by citing himself as a source on that issue.
When I realized what my weapons were capable of in the wrong hands, I shut it down, stopped manufacturing.
Tony, you chose to do that. If we sign this, we surrender our right to choose. What if this panel sends us somewhere we don't think we should go? What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own.
Despite Steve's best efforts, it doesn't move Stark in the slightest, for Tony believes that if they don't willingly sign themselves over, they will be forced to.
That's the fact. That won't be pretty.
You're saying they'll come for me.
We would protect you.
So before we get to Natasha's point of view, let's review the score. Rhodey, Vision, and Stark express their intentions to sign the Sokovia Accords, whereas Steve and Sam won't, and Wanda, the most neutral leaning in this scene, expresses fear that these government types would come for her. So she won't either. Judging by her instant rejection from the scene that introduces the Accords, it's safe to infer that she is on the side against the Accords, even if not specifically on Steve's. That leaves us with Natasha's vote deciding the outcome for the Avengers as a whole. And here it is.
Maybe Tony's right. If we have one hand on the wheel, we can still steer. We have made some very public mistakes. We need to win their trust back.
The debate ends with Tony shocked that Natasha would agree with him. But upon acceptance, Tony says,
Case closed. I win.
A moment later, Steve excuses himself from the room after reading the world's most insensitive text ever sent. What the hell, dude? In the end, Steve's side of the argument loses by one tie-breaking point. And this is how the scene ends. Despite Tony leaving the group but coming back, when Steve leaves the group, he doesn't come back. The debate scene is split into 3 acts, beginning immediately with Rhodey and Sam already arguing. Act 2 is Stark making his case, and Act 3 is Steve defending his case until he can no longer. In Act 1, we begin with Rhodey, who's very animated. Not nearly as animated as Stark, but still, he's talking with his hands. He's rotating his body to make his point, but then he puts his hands in his pockets to give Vision a chance to attack whatever Sam is saying. And after Vision gives his 2 cents, prompting the boom, Rhodey sits on the couch leg. And we can tell this is where Rhodey is sitting when Tony comes back after making his speech. It's as if to say he's rested his case with Vision's couch. Sam, on the other hand, stays right where he is for the entire scene. Oh, and where exactly would that be?
Don't say it. Don't you say it.
Left.
Come on!
Seriously though, this is perfect. Sam not only remains to the left behind Cap's chair, but his arms are crossed the entire time as well. Meaning, he's not only staying at Cap's side, he's not open to any other viewpoint. He really only shifts positions toward the end when one of his most valued allies from previous battles is not coming to his side of this battle. When Vision speaks, he has a relaxed posture on the couch. That said, his "this is beyond science" pose indicates that he has been giving the situation some serious thought. He stays in this posture for the rest of the scene. In some ways, Vision is a constant. His approach is dispassionate, but not uncalculated.
An equation.
Also, look at this. He sets down a chess piece, I think a black rook here, the moment he begins to speak. Vision is confident about where he's placing himself on the field. He knows his place, he knows his role, to castle the final piece of victory away from the enemy.
I've had a vision. A whirlpool that sucks in all hope of life, and at its center is that.
What, the gem?
It's the Mind Stone. It's one of the 6 Infinity Stones, the greatest power in the universe, unparalleled in its destructive capabilities.
However, after everything he says about catastrophe, and Clint breaking Wanda out of the compound, the same room they're sitting in, and Wanda dumping his dense ass to a Jules Verne classic, and then the airport scene where he aims for Sam but hits Rhodey and almost assuredly kills him, Vision is unsure what to do with himself for the first time in his life. But dude, had it not been for Friday's voiceover,
heartbeat detected.
This would have been a much stronger movie.
Don't worry, nobody dies in this story. They just get really big boo-boos. What did I tell you?
I became distracted.
Vision's final moment in the film is sitting in the same spot on the couch during the debate, twirling a black rook and not setting it down. As an artificial, calculated being, his opinions on a big issue like the Accords are invaluable, as his views are kept straight. Straight up and down, straight left to right. But when he's silently twirling the rook at the end of Civil War, this brief shot illustrates his uncertainty. Uncertainty that he can fulfill that protective role, since his last major action thus far had been an unintentional casualty. Vision is unable to set down the rook because he has lost vision. And if this wasn't enough of a digression, the fact that he holds a black piece shows that his side will not be the ones initiating the war, but instead the ones responding. Because the black pieces go second.
We're the Avengers, not the pre-Vengers.
Okay.
Right?
You made your point. Just sit down.
Okay.
Stark has the most dramatic blocking out of everyone else in the scene. He begins lounged and still with his face palmed. He rolls his eyes. He's completely fed up with the debate, brooding instead of interjecting. Like I said before, Nat and Steve call attention to this.
You're being uncharacteristically non-hyperverbal.
It's because he's already made up his mind.
Boy, you know me so well.
When Tony's called out, he has to leave that area and into the kitchen. He then turns his back on the team, puts up a barrier of technology between himself and the others, and proceeds to present his predetermined position. Also, I find it interesting why, practically, he's going to the kitchen.
Actually, I'm nursing an electromagnetic headache. That's what's going on, Cap. It's just pain. It's discomfort.
So he grabs a cup, the French press of water, and brings them to the counter, where he seemingly pops a painkiller in his mouth and uses the water to wash it down. As soon as he swallows the pill, he says,
There's no decision-making process here. We need to be put in check. Whatever form that takes, I'm game.
The painkiller represents what the Sokovia Accords are to Tony, not as they actually are, a general response to a specific problem, but rather something that eases his head, something that eases his conscience. As Steve retorts, this document just shifts the blame. It shifts the pain, the guilt. This tiny action of swallowing a pill is nothing less than a genuine reflection of Tony's motives. He's not looking for the right answer. Whatever form that takes is what he wants. He's looking for an out, an escape from the responsibility because of the pain that occurs when his decisions go awry. And yet he chose Spider-Man as his protege.
With great power comes great responsibility.
Last thing with Iron Man, Tony stands firmly in front of the counter before the team, arms crossed, immovable like Falcon. But he doesn't stay that way. He comes back, not to reconcile, but to charge in and challenge the unbudgeable Steve, whom I'm going to save for the end. Then later, when Nat agrees with Tony, a moment when Tony no longer needs to be on the offensive.
Focus up. I'm sorry, did I just mishear you, or did you agree with me?
Oh, I want to take it back.
No, you can't retract it.
He loosens up and cracks a joke. He breaks his own tension because he has enough people on his side to win the debate.
Okay, case closed. I win.
Now Wanda. Wanda only says one thing for the entire scene. As a result, she reveals her concerns more with her hand movements. The first moment we see her is on Equation, and she's staring at her hand, a significant cause to the explosion that killed many innocents. In a way, the same explosion that started the entire debate. When she's listening to Stark, her hand is out. When there's the close-up, we're back to the hands. Wanda's not really concerned with the politics of the Accords as much as she is with the public perception of being a monster and what's going to happen to her. So she holds a weaker posture than anyone else in the scene. Wanda is not accepting a real stance on the Accords because she is struggling to believe that she can trust herself. As essentially the final word, Natasha's posture throughout the whole debate has been shifting. At first she is relaxed, then focused, and by the end, when Tony returns, her hands are held forward, ready to give her say and perhaps an olive branch. Her shifting postures may indicate that she's indecisive about how to approach the Accords. They could also harken back to her spy tendencies to keep people guessing. Ultimately, it's her dialogue that reveals what she truly feels. Starkly so, in fact. I'll see myself out.
No, you can't retract it.
Finally, Steve. Rogers has been sitting in the central chair for the entire scene. He's in the central chair because, well, he's the central figure of the movie. From a certain point of view, he is the deciding factor on whether or not the Avengers as a whole sign the Accords. Like Sam, he doesn't budge from his literal and ideological position. He's been calmly reading the document since before Sam and Rhodey began sparring. When Vision speaks and the debate actually starts to matter, Steve ceases reading, but stays sitting. Throughout the whole debate, he remains seated, until that ever so blunt "the love of your life is officially gone forever" text is the thing that pushes him out of the chair and out of the frame. Seriously though, why is he seated? Why isn't Steve standing up when Tony towers over him? Why does he refuse to assert a visual high ground to his biggest objector? I find that there are two reasons. First, just use your imagination. What would it look like if Steve shut up from his chair and matched Tony's intensity? Well, it would look a lot like a fight between two or more people that hate each other's guts. And that's not what this is. This is a debate, and a serious one, but still a conversation among family. Families who care about the well-being and thoughts of every member sit down with each member. Those who are more intense, more passionate about the family problem may be standing up and even grandstanding, but the rest of the group understands that their anger is not directed at any single specific person, just the problem. Steve Rogers not standing up proves that these Avengers movies work. Not by having the greatest set pieces and macho dramatic moments, but by earning the ensemble and respecting the relationships. Second thing, this blocking choice illustrates Steve's physical and moral positions as unmoving, like a foundational rock. As the one who leads the Avengers, his way of doing so is one that hasn't changed since when he first became Captain America. It's why the following scene in London is what ultimately aligns Steve against the Accords.
And she said compromise where you can. But where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
What made to you so special?
Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn.
That's been Captain America in every MCU movie. Now, that's not to say, necessarily, that Tony Stark is a hypocritical huckster with a bad moral compass and weak integrity. I think the difference in movement reveals how these men have had to deal with their problems in their respective roles. In every Iron Man movie, and in some self-inflicted form, Tony loses. In Iron Man, he's captured by the 10 rings because of his weapons. In Iron Man 2, he loses the argument over the arc reactor race when some Russian rando has one that works, not to mention he was slowly losing his grip on reality because he was slowly losing his life. And in Iron Man 3, he loses his entire Malibu mansion and in the same attack almost loses Pepper. And then after said attack, he loses connection with Jarvis. But then when Jarvis comes back, he loses access to his latest Iron Man armor, forcing him to go to Home Depot so that he can DIY the bad guys. He fails and then evolves.
How'd you solve the icing problem?
Icing problem?
Might want to look into it.
Both by upgrading his tech and by becoming a better man. Tony is the biggest loser, because only a loser can be an overcomer. On the other hand, in both Captain America's, and to some extent the Avengers, the primary character arc for Steve Rogers is becoming more of himself. Steve never changes. Typically, you might think that's a sign of poor writing, but Captain America remains interesting as a character because he's still directly challenged ideologically.
Bucky, come on, there are men laying down their lives. I got no right to do any less than them. That's what you don't understand. This isn't about me.
Right. Because you got nothing to prove.
This isn't freedom. This is fear.
S.H.I.E.L.D. takes the world as it is, not as we'd like it to be. It's getting damn near past time for you to get with that program, Cap.
Don't hold your breath.
He's cool because despite all this pressure to change and this evil force trying to push him out of the way, he stands strong, making his speech and finishing his goal. In other words, Iron Man wins by improving Iron Man, whereas Captain America wins by staying Captain America. So when those two heroes fight each other, they use their respective strategies. However, because they were friends who were never meant to kill each other, they both lose. As I mentioned before the start of this segment, Tony veers off in one direction away from the group, but he returns to the rest of the team. When Cap, on the other hand, leaves in the other direction, he doesn't return. Steve has effectively left the Avengers at this point, moved by the loss of yet another remnant of his past. When the UN is blown up in Vienna, Cap moves in the same way, driven to find that last remaining remnant, Bucky, outside of the Avengers' approval. And at the end of this choice, this is what Rhodey says.
Congratulations, Cap. You're a criminal.
He is no longer a part of the team. When Steve finally says,
I have to go,
it speaks volumes. He has to go. It's these movements, these lines that give so much weight to the rest of the film, to the rest of the MCU, especially this exchange at the airport.
I'm trying to keep you from tearing the Avengers apart.
You did that when you signed.
Problem is, they both got a point.
This scene ends on an ideological cliffhanger. The main character can't reach an agreement with the 4 Avengers willing to support the Accords. There's no compromise, no understanding, there is no true resolution. Yet, in terms of character exploration, the Sokovia Accord debate scene satisfies. Why is this? It's because, in one way or another, every character speaks on the Accords, but they do so in each hero's unique way. Taking every major movie in account, it makes perfect sense why Steve and Tony take actions in the way that they do. And that's the point. That's why it's engaging. Characters are making their points. Not some Disney higher-ups stapling their agenda onto beloved heroes, but the real people behind the heroes. No one apart from Natasha is willing to change their minds, and that's why Natasha's words strike harder than the rest.
Maybe Tony's right.
She's the only one willing to change. You know why? Because that's her character, the double agent. From KGB to S.H.I.E.L.D., from S.H.I.E.L.D. side to Steve's side, from Steve's side to the Avengers side. This scene is an excellent showcase of how pure character can drive a story forward. When you force your characters to be a certain way at any given point, and it's exactly who they'd be, then you're doing it right. Their viewpoints are presented, challenged, and for most of them, unmoved, save Natasha's support for Tony's side.
No, you can't retract it. Case closed. I win.
Except, nobody wins. Not really. Steve could have responded to Nat's argument in this scene, but it wouldn't be necessary. Primarily because we get to see how their disagreement unfolds later in London, but it's also unnecessary because sometimes that's just how real-life conversations work. People leave the big discussions unresolved all the time. But for the movie, it's a cliffhanger that draws the audience further in. This lack of resolution generates more tension to the rising conflict. We do not see the big problems being solved. What we see are promises being made. The scene ends with the viewer knowing who stands with who and why. But what we don't know is when. When will Steve officially leave? It's a question that generates further questions. What will it take for Steve to walk away? And when will that take place? What will the others think? What will they do? What's going to happen? If you manage to compel your audience to ask this question earnestly, you've got it. It's just good storytelling. And the audience cannot get to this question if the story is moving too quickly. If action is followed up with even more action, there's no time to breathe, there's no time to reflect, there's no time to care about the characters. And that is what this scene does best. It cares about the characters, about as much, if not more, than we do. This conversation, this debate, is satisfying, not only because it sets up the rest of the plot, but because it validates the Avengers as well-rounded, legitimate characters with well-reasoned, legitimate concerns. And when you validate the superheroes, you validate the investment in these superheroes. The Russo brothers, the screenwriters, the actors, they all achieved this by slowing down, looking around, and preparing the audience for what they were about to see. Cinema.
Talk about what made this decade-long cinematic universe special. And to do that,
when Nando v Movies got the ball rolling on One Marvelous Scene, he chose one of my favorite MCU scenes of all time. The after-party scene where they're drinking, having a good time, and trying to lift Thor's hammer. I highly recommend the video, because Nando is very good at analyzing movies when he's not trying to rewrite all of them. In that video, Nando explains how each interaction with Mjolnir reveals that character's MO. It's a fun scene because each Avenger has their highlight moment that brings them closer to the team by being who they are. And the fans love who they are. Only now, instead of Thor's hammer, we have the Sokovia Accords. One by one, every character, in their own unique way, makes their attempt to lift the Accords, to hold the weight that the document implies. Nobody can. Not alone. In another way, the Accords debate scene asks the Avengers the exact same question as the after-party scene. Are the Avengers worthy? This is what a conversation should look like, fictional and non. It's dynamic in flow, it's directed toward relevancy, and it's diverse in voice. Conversation should be dialogue, going back and forth. It is not a single speech that everyone must agree with. That's tyranny. It is not an argument over methods despite sharing the exact same values. That's stupid writing. Nor is it a screenwriter's biased lecture that goes completely unchallenged by a character who should be struggling with them on that issue. That's pure ego. For as it has been said, the one who has the final say is the one who wrote the screenplay. No, I said that. And seeing that I had the final say on this script, The Falcon and the Winter Soldier sucks dick. Like and subscribe.